Is it finally time for Verstappen F1 managers to admit defeat and chase the meta? Let's check it out with an Australian Grand Prix preview. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. It is Monday, March 18th. My name is Ewan, and on today's episode, we're going to get into some F1 fantasy with a Australian Grand Prix preview. Last week, I did a Saudi Arabia review and some early Australia team thoughts. So if you want some more F1 fantasy content, go check out that video as well. You'll see it after you like and subscribe to the channel if you do not mind. But yeah, this will be solely focused on the Australia Grand Prix. So let's get into it here. Quick announcement is that there will be a deadline live stream at God knows only what o'clock in the morning for me. I think it's going to be 4 a.m. for me, 3 a.m. for the Brits, or 5 a.m. for me, 4 a.m. for the Brits, midnight for East Coast, and about 3 or 4 p.m. for the Aussies around the world. But I will be live on YouTube breaking down FP3 results, the practice debrief that comes out, any simulations that have come out as well. So join me with some coffee and a donut at whatever o'clock in the morning it's going to be, or whatever time at night it's going to be for you around the world. And I will be breaking it all down before we have to lock in our lineups for the third race of the season. And the third race of the season is going to be in Australia. Albert Park circuit length 5.278 kilometers, 58 laps, 14 corners, 4 DRS zones. First Grand Prix here was in 1996. The only question I have is the 4 DRS zones. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, but they cut it back from 4 to 3 DRS zones because they were a little bit worried about the speed. That might have been 2022, because last year was the red flag apocalypse where there were 3 red flags in the race, 2 in like the last 4 laps. It was a disaster. Pretty much all over the spot. Yeah, because 2022 was when Alexander Albon went 57 of 58 laps on the same tire and then pitted at the end to still get a point. So yeah, Australia always has some entertaining aspects for us in regular Formula One, but especially in F1 fantasy. But yeah, so the 4 DRS zones will be interesting because there's just 2 DRS detection zones. So you get 2 sets of DRS. So maybe this means that Max Verstappen will not so easily get away from the field in the first lap. So hopefully whoever is in second can keep him within a second, and they should get 2 batches of DRS around that second lap. So should make for some interesting racing, hopefully. It's also just a pretty fun circuit to kind of drive around. Especially on the F1 game, if you have a console or whatever. But yes, so 4 DRS zones, that should be quite interesting for this weekend's race. Here are all the times that we kind of need to know for this weekend. So Friday has practice 1, practice 2, Saturday, practice 3 and qualifying, and Sunday is the Grand Prix. So like your traditional F1 calendar is back. No Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week. We don't get another one of those until Vegas at almost the end of the season. So yeah, back to regular scheduled programming for us F1 heads. The only thing is, yeah, practice 1 for the US East Coast is going to be 9:30 on Thursday evening. So just watch out for that. But yeah, qualifying 1 a.m. for the States, 5 a.m. for the UK, and 4 p.m. local time. So I will be on an hour before that with the deadline live stream. But practice 1, practice 2 will be nice. That means us in Europe, us Europeans, should have the practice debrief around lunchtime. So we will have most of the day to break down that FP1, FP2 data, kind of see who's doing well, who's not. And then when we wake up before qualifying, we'll have practice 3 and any more sims. But yeah, early weekend for us Europeans. Not too many of them on the F1 calendar, so it's not too much to worry about. Here is what Pirelli is going to be bringing to Australia. So in the first race of the year in Bahrain, it was the C1, C2, C3. 2 weeks ago, it was the C2, C3, C4, and now they're going with the 3 softest compounds in the C3, C4, and C5. The C4 did really well in Saudi Arabia, but all 3 of these tracks are really different to begin the year. So it'll be interesting to see how the tires perform over the free practices as we head into the weekend and kind of what strategies the teams will come up with heading into Sunday's Grand Prix. Here is how it went down last year in the Australia Grand Prix. If you remember, 3 red flags. I think Carlos Sainz went out. The Alpines had a double DNF. It was a disaster all over the place. Max Verstappen won the race and had qualifying. Lance Stroll had a pretty good weekend, qualified 6th and 4th, or finished in 4th as he bounced back from Saudi Arabia. So does that sound familiar? Because, yeah, Lance Stroll with a DNF in Saudi Arabia, just like he had 2 years or last year as well, and then came back with a 4th place. So we'll see if the Aston is kind of in shape for Australia again, and if we can still rely on Lance Stroll. I think I will not be able to, because he's going to have to be my kind of balance kind of budget person to get rid of this week in F1 Fantasy to make what I want to do in my lineup work. Here is kind of where we're at. So the big questions are in F1 Fantasy, is it time to chase the meta? And the meta has kind of turned into Sergio Perez / Charles Leclerc with the 2 big constructors of Red Bull and Ferrari. So here I break down all the 5 kind of best of the rest drivers, not including Lewis Hamilton on here, just because not very impressive and doesn't really need to be an F1 asset at this point in the season. We'll see what happens here. But yeah, Norris, Perez, Leclerc, Russell, and Sainz. And honestly, out of these 5, Perez, Leclerc, and Sainz are the only guys I'm considering to replace Max Verstappen with. I've got the price, the points per million, and the value gained on this chart here if you are listening on the podcast side. So for Perez, Leclerc, and Sainz, Perez is 22.1 million, Leclerc 20.4, and Carlos Sainz is 18.8. Points, 62 for Perez, 59 for Leclerc, 36 for Sainz in one race. Points per million is 1.4 for Checo, 1.45 for Leclerc, and 1.91 for Carlos. And then value gained here, 1.3 for Checo and Charles, and 0.3 for Sainz. The big thing for the Australian Grand Prix is we don't know if Carlos Sainz is actually going to race after he had a emergency appendectomy before the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, where Ollie Behrman came in and performed spectacularly for Ferrari. There hasn't been any updates as of this recording. It's currently 6:38 in the UK on Monday morning. So we will hopefully get some more info around Tuesday or Wednesday. If we see Carlos in the paddock, that will be nice. But the 3 main options here, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, those are the 3 guys I'm considering to replace Max Verstappen with in my F1 lineup. Should have mentioned this at the top, but if you don't have time for the full episode, the timestamps are in the description below, and I will be going over a Max and then kind of Red Bull team, how we're going to sort that out, and what you'll have to do if you just already have the meta with Checo, Red Bull, and Ferrari. So it's not just a Max episode. Both situations will be covered in this episode, so check out the timestamps below. But yeah, this kind of best of the rest, where we're all, if the rest of us on the Max strategy right now, we need to kind of pick who we're going to go to the dance with here, Checo, Charles, or Carlos. So this is kind of breaking all that down. As of right now, if Carlos is healthy and he looks good in FP1, I think that's where I'm going to be going, just because it seems like he has the most potential to gain budget after Checo and Leclerc gained 1 million. Sainz, if he has a good weekend, he would seem to be the next candidate to gain 1 million. And that's what we need in F1 Fantasy right now. We need budget. Constructor Conundrum, there's not much of a conundrum going on right now. It feels pretty obvious that we want to get to Red Bull and Ferrari as quickly as possible. They are the only 2 constructors with over 100 points on the season right now. They are both picked over 30%. So Ferrari's at 36%, Red Bull at 31%. So Ferrari's even more popular than Red Bull right now, which is a little eye-opening. Mercedes here, 18%, Aston Martin, 22%. But yeah, Red Bull and Ferrari also 3.17 points per million for Red Bull, 3.29 points per million for Ferrari. So they're even giving you great bang for your buck. And the upgrades here for F1 Fantasy, this is not super official. This was some sleuthing on the internet trying to find out where we are going to go, or like what information is out there. So it sounds like Red Bull's going to bring their first major upgrade at Japan. So that'll be something to look forward to, possibly going to the Zero Pod that they showed off at their launch. So that'll be something to watch. Mercedes was apparently supposed to bring their first upgrade to Australia, but they've decided to use Australia as another test race to see what is going on with the current concept that they have, which doesn't sound great for their odds of having a good race. So if you were thinking of going Mercedes, I would probably avoid that. Ferrari sounds like their most aggressive update of the first half of the season is coming at Imola. Same with Aston Martin. So Red Bull is kind of leading the charge, and they're going to be the first team to bring some radical updates. Nothing on McLaren that I could find like definitively. Um, a lot of stuff saying like it could take months again for them to bring their upgrades. So we'll hope that that comes earlier for the papaya to give us another option at the constructor and F1 fantasy. But yeah, for right now, Red Bull and Ferrari are the two constructors that you want to own in this game. Here is F1 Fantasy Tools, their kind of budget tool that they've got here, the team calculator. This is only based on the average results from the first two races. So I put it at each price point here. So 104 million if you have that budget, 103 million, 102, and then if you just have to have Max, if you refuse to play F1 Fantasy without Max Verstappen in your lineup, more respect to you, but that would be the lineup you have here. So if you have 104 million in budget, this is the lineup that has the best results as of right now. So it's Red Bull and Ferrari as your constructor, Verstappen as the two times, and then Logan Sargent, Zhou Guanyu, Nico Hulkenberg, and Valtteri Bottas. Those are the four cheapest drivers in the game to pair with Red Bull, Ferrari, and Verstappen, but that gets you 247.2 points every weekend through the first two races. If you have 103 million, Red Bull, Ferrari, Sainz, Alonso, Magnussen, Sargent, Hulkenberg, that's 102.9 million. You get 243.2 points. If your budget is 102 million or less, the best team you can come up with here is it's actually 99 million. So even if you're starting your F1 fantasy quest this weekend, it's Red Bull, Ferrari, Perez, Ocon, Magnussen, Sargent, and Zhou Guanyu. And if you have to have Max, this costs 103.9 million. That's why 104 is the magic number right now in F1 fantasy. But it's Red Bull, Haas, Verstappen, Sainz here, Magnussen, Sargent, and Hulkenberg. So yeah, and that's 230 points. So that's 17 points down. If you remember the first one or two episodes of this season, I was kind of like, well, 17 points over one weekend is not a big deal. But at this point, I'm trying not to be too reactionary, but it does feel like the warning signs are starting to go off that we're going to start falling further and further behind. It's not even like just a points thing, it's also a budget thing. So we really need to, as Max Verstappen managers, pick up the pace and budget getting and kind of try to catch up to the meta there. So here is my Max Verstappen team, my T1, as you would say. So this is kind of where I'm at right now. I've got Max, Lance, Daniel Ricciardo, Valtteri Bottas, Alexander Albon, Red Bull Racing, and RB. 4 days and 22 hours to go until lineups lock. So yes, starting to get down to it. There should be some stuff coming out around the paddock in the next 24 hours. Hopefully we'll get an update on Carlos Sainz. But the first thing that we need to do here is take out Red Bull, take out Max Verstappen, plug back in Ferrari, and then you can see here. So that would be two transfers I'm using right now. I can't get Checo. I can't get Charles. I can get George, Oscar, Ollie Behrman, which would be the Carlos Sainz spot as of right now. If Sainz isn't going to race, Behrman is an option. He's probably going to gain a lot of budget, and that would actually give me enough room here to, I would just be short of Fernando Alonso. So that would maybe be something where I would honestly think about activating the wild card if I really wanted to get to Alonso, but I think that would be all right. So I'll just go back to where is he? Where are you, Mr. Lance? Yeah, so Lance Stroll, I could keep him there, and then, yeah, it would give me enough money to kinda get it would definitely give me enough money to get to Carlos Sainz, but not to, Charles or Checo. But I think the 3rd transfer I'm gonna have to use here is, gonna get me down to Lance Stroll a little bit here. And that means that I will be going with an Alpine driver, which is not the worst thing in the world because Esteban Ocon here, he's got 7 and 8 points, 15 points. He's risen quite a bit in price, a million over the first 2 races. So that's not bad at all if the Alpine train keeps kind of running smoothly. Although Pierre Gasly did not have the best time there. The other thing is if I was going to keep Lance Stroll, that would give me some money here to kinda go with yes, I could get Checo, keep Lance and Ferrari, but I would also have to go down to one of the bottom feeders here, like a it would have to be Logan Sargent because Nico Hulkenberg would be just out of reach for me. So, double Williams doesn't feel great either, but I do get to keep a piece of the Aston Martin. So if they look good, if Lance Stroll looks comfortable, this is an option I could go with. Logan Sargent, he rose point 0.5 last week, 10 points in the season. So he's in the positive, folks. That's not too bad. So that is something to consider there. I think he DNF'd last year with Nick DeVries kind of early on in the race or after the red flag. I believe. But yes, so Logan Sargent could be an option there, but running double Williams is a little tough. And also keeping Valtteri Bottas in there, but this would allow me to keep like I'd have double Red Bull, Ferrari, and Aston Martin. So that is certainly an option. But if I did want to keep Danny Rick, which I'm not entirely sure I do, I'd probably have to go Esteban Ocon, or yeah, I'd have to go down from Lance Stroll to Esteban Ocon. And here is my Checo team. This is my T3 team. This is kind of what I started off with at the start of the year. Nothing too much going on here. I mean, like I'd have 1.8 million to play with. I got 2 free transfers. I could take out Danny Rick if it would let me. There we go. So yeah, take out Danny Rick and Yuki, and that would probably give me enough money to get up to a Lance Stroll plus a just enough to get a Nico Hulkenberg, which is then I'm running double Haas over here with Alexander Albon. That's not the worst idea in the world. Haas's look pretty strong. They seem to be all right in the early goings of the season. But then development season kicks along. So this is where I would maybe go if I had a Checo lineup already. But once again, I mean, we're just waiting for FP1, FP2, even FP3 results. FP2 will be the most like consistent compared to qualifying. But we will want to wait for SP3 because last time in FP3, if you made your transfers early, FP3, we saw Zhou Guanyu like shunt his car and he missed qualifying altogether. We got the news about Carlos Sainz between FP2 and FP3. So definitely reasons to wait until FP3. I understand that people maybe aren't going to wake up in the middle of the night to make their F1 fantasy transfers, but I would definitely encourage you to wait as long as possible, at least until after FP2, see the practice debrief, which all of us Europeans and Americans should see around midday, I would think, from F1.com to kind of get some data on that. So definitely wait for all of that to come out at least. And if you can, wake up for FP3, join me on YouTube for the live stream, and we will go all over all of the uh, possibilities for your F1 fantasy lineup. One last reminder here of the lineup locks for Saturday, March 23rd. It is a Saturday this week, no Friday lock, so don't worry about it. So local time in Australia, 4 p.m., UK time, 5 a.m., USA Eastern, 1 a.m. So it's a little early start for us on this side of the world, but no problems. The Aussies deserve their fair share of good time zones for F1 fantasy. But yeah, join me an hour before lineups lock on YouTube for my deadline live stream where I'll be going over all of the practice reports FP1, FP2, the practice debrief, the sims from F1 Fantasy Tools, the sims from 11ify, all that great stuff that is phenomenal content in the F1 fantasy space. Let me know if you have any questions between now and the deadline stream in the comments below, or you can follow me on X at UNFPL. Happy to chat F1 fantasy there. But yeah, that's going to do it for the whole week. I will be tweeting out anything I see on X over the next week at UNFPL. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast, wherever you're listening. And yeah, it's going to be a fun week. 4 days to go until we get some cars on the track. Hopefully, we'll get some Carlos Sainz news. That will kind of help us out with our decisions heading into the weekend at Melbourne, which should be a fantastic race. Always one of the more entertaining tracks to kind of watch. The crowds are great. Everyone seems to be having a good time. Hopefully, I will get there one year in the future. But hopefully, that was a good Australia Grand Prix preview. Let me know in the comments below what questions you've got once again. And yeah, once again, thanks for listening and watching. And I will talk to you next time.